What's up guys, Asian here again with another Elsewhere theory crafting video, and today we're going to be going over Whirling Blades, and to a certain extent we'll also be talking about Executioner as well on the two-handed skill line, and how they're basically playing out right now. What's the big deal with Whirling Blades? Why did they feel like they had to nerf Whirling Blades? So for those guys who haven't really been paying attention to the PTS patch notes, they did decide to change how Steel Tornado and Whirling Blades work in Elsewhere. So in Elsewhere right now, the Whirlwind morphs, Steel Tornado, and Whirling Blades have been changed a little bit. So on live right now, Steel Tornado does have that execute component, so it deals up to 100% more damage to enemies with a certain amount of health threshold. Once you hit a certain health threshold, you start gaining more and more damage. He decided to remove that from Steel Tornado and Whirlwind, the base morph, and put that only onto Whirling Blades, and then they made Steel Tornado have a bit of a larger radius, and then they also reduced the cost of Steel Tornado as well. So now Whirling Blades is the new quote-unquote stamina execute for those classes that don't have a class execute, which is mainly just going to be everybody except Nightblades. And so the reason why they felt like they had to nerf Whirling Blades was initially in 5.0.0 and 5.0.1, the scaling was 100% more damage to enemies with starting at 100% health. So as long as the enemy's health kept on going down and down and down, it would scale accordingly. So they decided that was too much, which in actuality it was. If it was start to scale at 50% health, right now, Flying Blade and Whirling Blades, the difference between them in terms of percentage difference is around 22% on the tooltip information, which is kind of a good baseline to use when it comes to scaling executes. And so in the old version of Whirling Blades, when it scaled starting at 100% health, you would be able to swap to Whirling Blades at around 75%-ish health if you're running Flying Blade on like a Stam Sork, and it would do better than Flying Blade. Obviously, they said, no, we can't exactly have that, so they decided to change it so it started to scale at 50% health rather than 100% health. Now, this is definitely going to be a nerf. While the execute damage remains the same, the relative amount of damage that you gain in the at a specific health threshold is going to be different. So for those of you guys who don't know how scaling executes work, so this primarily impacts Whirling Blades and Executioner. This also impacts moves like Radiant Oppression on the Templar skill line. But the way it works is it's all linear. So in this instance, 100% more damage to enemies with less than 50% health. This 100% scaling is linear to each percentage of health that's missing. So in order to figure out, okay, how much does 1% health actually mean in terms of percentage damage increase, it's pretty simple. You just take the amount of damage and divide it by the health threshold. So in this instance, 100 divided by 50, and so that means you get every 2% health, so 100 divided by 50 is 2. Every 2% health below that health threshold, you gain 1% additional, I should say, okay. I'm sorry, I mixed up my numbers here. So 100 divided by 50 is 2. So you get 2% more damage for every 1% missing health that the enemy has. And if we take the same kind of notion to Executioner, which is 350% more damage with less than 50% health, 350 divided by 50 is 7, so you get 7% more damage per 1% health missing below that health threshold. And this game does calculate out to a not the whole number, so it doesn't truncate that number. It actually does continue to scale as long as health is going down. But that's the generic formula here. So if we want to just compare Whirling Blades to the old versus the new version, let's say you're sitting at around 30% health. With the old version of Whirling Blades, you get 70% more damage. In the new version, you have that's 20% below 50%, so you get 2% for every 1% health missing, so you would get 40% additional execute damage. So 70% versus 40% more damage, and that just keeps on going on up until you basically kill the enemy. So even at 10% health, the old version, you get 90%, in the new version, you get 80%. So it is a nerf for Whirling Blades across the board. Now, that doesn't mean that Whirling Blades still isn't going to be used as a spammable, it just lowered the threshold by a little bit. So remember earlier I said the difference between Flying Blade and Whirling Blade is about 22%. So instead of using Whirling Blades starting at 75% health, now you're going to start using it at around 35% health instead. So all they basically did was basically drop that health threshold down from a very, very high value, in this case 75%, down to a lower value, 35% instead. And you can use the exact same mathematics with Executioner and Wrecking Blow. This is a little bit more tricky because Wrecking Blow does have a cast time, so let's say you're able to cast 20 Executioners within a certain period of time, you'll cast less than 20 Wrecking Blows in that same period of time, just because it does have that cast time associated with it, and there is a little bit of a post-global cooldown associated with that cast time, so you won't be able to cast exactly 20 Wrecking Blows in that same period of time that you'll be able to cast 20 Executioners. So that's kind of the idea behind why Whirling Blades has been kind of something that a lot of stamina DPS mains have been taking a look at, and why they decided to change Whirling Blade that executes scaling as of 5.0.2. Now, like I mentioned, all they did was basically shifted the goalpost down, so you don't use it at 75%, now you use it at 35%, but it's still probably going to be the execute for classes that don't have a class execute. So again, that pretty much applies to every class except for Stamina Nightblades. So even though they didn't nerf it, it still looks like it's going to be here to stay. And again, you can use this mathematics across pretty much anything that scales. So things like Radiant Oppression, Jesus Beam on the Templar deals a certain amount of extra damage to enemies below 50% health. So it'll scale linearly according to that, plus the extra 20% damage based on percentage missing magicka is also scalar, I should say linear. So it does 20% more damage at full max, at full magicka, and then it scales downward accordingly in a linear fashion. So that's basically how scaling executes work in this game, and that's why Whirling Blades is still probably going to end up being used in Stamina DPS build, assuming that nothing changes between now and when Elsewhere is released on live. So that is it for this video. Hope you guys found this informative, and I will see you guys in the next dungeon.